Welcome back to History for Sleep. This is a quiet place where the noise of the present fades, and the past is allowed to speak slowly. Here history is not rushed, names are not shouted, and the most important stories are often the ones that almost disappeared. If you enjoy calm storytelling, deep reflection, and long journeys through humanity's forgotten paths, you're exactly where you need to be. Tonight, we're exploring the forgotten historical figures who almost changed humanity's trajectory forever. Not emperors whose names fill textbooks, not conquerors carved into monuments, but individuals whose ideas, decisions, discoveries, or moments in time nearly redirected the course of civilization, and then slipped quietly out of memory. History is often taught as a sequence of inevitabilities, as if what happened was the only thing that could have happened. But the truth is more fragile. Again and again humanity stood at crossroads, sometimes guided by a single person, sometimes stopped by chance, sometimes silenced deliberately. These are the people who stood at those edges, people whose influence was almost world-shaping, people who were nearly remembered as turning points, people whose absence is as important as their presence. To understand them, we must let go of the idea that history moves forward cleanly. History swerves, stumbles, nearly breaks, and sometimes it barely survives. Let us begin with a simple truth. Every major shift in human history, agriculture, writing, science, democracy, industrialization, depended on individuals willing to think differently than everyone around them. But not all of them succeeded. Some were ignored. Some were erased, some were killed, some lived just a little too early. Their names faded, but their shadows remain. Consider the case of Hero of Alexandria. Living in the 1st century, Hero designed machines powered by steam. Not metaphorical steam, actual steam-powered devices. One of them, the Yalapile, is often described as the world's first steam engine. It spun, moved. It demonstrated controlled mechanical power. Had this idea been pursued, refined, and applied, industrialization could have begun nearly 2,000 years earlier. Instead, it was treated as a curiosity, a novelty, a clever trick. Why? Because the ancient world relied on slave labor. Machines were unnecessary. Innovation was interesting, but not urgent. Hero's ideas were not wrong. They were inconvenient. And so, humanity waited centuries to rediscover them. Now consider Hypatia of Alexandria, a mathematician, astronomer, philosopher. She taught openly. She questioned authority. She preserved classical knowledge during a time of rising dogma. Hypatia was not forgotten by accident. She was murdered, killed by a mob in a city that was turning away from reason toward certainty. Her death symbolized more than violence. It marked the narrowing of acceptable thought. What if she had lived? What if her school had endured? What if inquiry had remained sacred? History might have leaned towards science earlier. Tolerance, pluralism. Instead, fear won. And fear slows progress. Now let us move east, to China, to the figure of Zhang Heng. An inventor, astronomer, and engineer during the Han Dynasty. He built a seismometer capable of detecting earthquakes hundreds of miles away. Not modern, not electronic, but mechanical. A device so precise that it recorded tremors before humans felt them. This was nearly 2,000 years ago. And yet, his work was not widely expanded, not globally shared, not industrialized. Knowledge remained regional. Contained, controlled. Imagine a world where early disaster detection spread across continents, where science moved faster because information traveled freely. It did not. Now consider someone even more obscure. Antikythera's unknown engineers. The Antikythera mechanism was discovered in a shipwreck off the Greek coast. A corroded mass of gears. At first dismissed, later revealed to be a complex astronomical computer, predicting eclipses, tracking planetary motion, encoding cycles with astonishing precision. Its creators are unknown, their knowledge unmatched for over 1,000 years. And yet, no similar devices appear afterward, which raises a haunting question. Did the knowledge die with them? Was it suppressed? Or was it simply lost when society collapsed? We will never know. And that is the point. Progress is not guaranteed. Now let us speak of figures whose ideas were too disruptive to survive. Consider Giordano Bruno. He believed the universe was infinite, that stars were suns, that planets might host life. These ideas were not fringe. They were logical, but they threatened authority. Bruno was burned alive, not for science alone, but for refusing to recant his vision of a vast, decentralized cosmos. If his ideas had spread freely, humanity's self-image might have shifted centuries earlier. Instead, humility came late, and fear arrived early. There are also figures who were erased not by violence but by credit theft. Women, minorities, outsiders, people whose discoveries were absorbed into institutions that refused to name them. Their ideas changed the world. Their names did not. Then there are the strangest cases of all. The people whose ideas were dismissed and later rediscovered as revolutionary. Gregor Mendel, ignored in his lifetime, foundational to genetics after his death. Ada Lovelace, understood computing as more than calculation, forgotten for decades. Nikola Tesla, visionary, impoverished, ridiculed. Each stood slightly ahead of their time. History punished them for it. As the night deepens, remember this. Humanity's path was never fixed. It was shaped by fragile moments, individual choices, lost voices, and for every famous figure remembered, there are dozens who almost changed everything. As you rest, let their stories drift gently through the dark, uncelebrated, uncertain, unfinished. Let the night hold these stories gently, because the more closely we look at history, the more we realize how often the future balanced on a single, quiet life. There was a time in the ancient world when the idea of democracy nearly vanished entirely. In the centuries after Athens, representative government was fragile, short-lived, dismissed as chaos by empires that preferred order through authority. One of the least remembered figures from this era is Cleisthenes of Athens. He was not a philosopher, not a warrior, but a reformer. Cleisthenes dismantled aristocratic power structures and reorganized society so ordinary citizens could participate in governance. This was radical, dangerous, unstable, and it almost failed. Had Cleisthenes been removed early, democracy might have been remembered as a failed experiment, not an ideal. Instead, it survived just long enough to inspire others centuries later. But history rarely credits him. The idea outlived the person. Now consider a very different figure. Ibn al-Haytham, known in the West as Al-Hazan. Living in the Islamic Golden Age, he developed the scientific method centuries before it was named. He insisted on experimentation, observation, repeatability. This was revolutionary. At a time when authority ruled knowledge, he argued that truth must be tested, not inherited. His ideas influenced optics, physics, and perception. But when his works reached Europe, they were absorbed without his name. His method changed humanity's relationship with reality, but his identity faded. Without figures like him, modern science might never have emerged as it did. Now let us slow further. Consider Wang Zhen, a Chinese inventor during the Yuan dynasty. He developed movable type printing centuries before Gutenberg. It worked. It spread knowledge. It lowered barriers to literacy. But it failed to transform society on a massive scale. Language complexity, political structure, cultural priorities. The technology was sound. The environment was not. History teaches us something uncomfortable here. Innovation alone is not enough. Society must be ready to receive it. Wang Zhen did everything right. The world simply wasn't ready. Now let us speak of someone whose ideas almost prevented catastrophe. Vasily Arkhipov, a Soviet naval officer during the Cuban Missile Crisis. In a submerged submarine surrounded by U.S. forces, his captain believed nuclear war had begun. Protocol required unanimous consent to launch a nuclear torpedo. 2 officers agreed. Arkhipov did not. He refused. That single decision may have prevented nuclear war. He was not celebrated. He was not rewarded. He returned to obscurity. Humanity continued. Few people know his name. Now consider someone whose absence reshaped the world. Srinivasa Ramanujan. A self-taught mathematician whose mind perceived patterns others could not. His work hinted at structures still being explored today. He died young. Poor. Undernourished. Had he lived longer, entire fields might have accelerated. His notebooks still inspire discoveries decades later. This is another pattern. History is not always shaped by what happens, but by what does not. By lives cut short. Ideas never completed. Voices silenced too soon. Then there are figures erased by politics. Consider Ignaz Semmelweis. He discovered that handwashing drastically reduced mortality in childbirth. He was mocked, dismissed, institutionalized. Thousands died unnecessarily because his idea challenged authority. By the time he was proven right, it was too late for him. He nearly changed medicine decades earlier. But history chose comfort over truth. Now let us pause, because this is where the pattern becomes clear. Humanity does not move forward because of brilliance alone. It moves forward when brilliance aligns with power, culture, and timing. Most brilliance never gets that chance. Most visionaries are not dangerous because they are wrong, but because they are early. As you rest, consider this quietly. How many people alive today hold ideas that could change the future, but will never be heard? History does not remember everyone. It selects, and selection is not always fair. As the night deepens, let these almost forgotten lives settle softly into thought. Not as regrets, but as reminders. The world you live in is one version of many possible worlds, and it only exists because certain people were heard, and many others were not. Now the stories grow quieter, more unsettling, because we move from chance into intention. There are moments in history where forgetting feels deliberate, where individuals disappear not because their ideas failed, but because they were inconvenient. Let us begin with a figure who almost reshaped religion itself. Arius of Alexandria. In the 4th century, Arius argued that Christ was not co-eternal with God, that divinity had hierarchy. That belief should be debated, not enforced. His ideas spread rapidly, so rapidly that they threatened unity. The response was not discussion. It was suppression. Councils were convened. Doctrines were fixed. Alternative interpretations were declared heresy. Arius was exiled. His writings destroyed. Had Arianism prevailed, Christianity might have evolved into a radically different faith. Less centralized, more philosophical, less authoritarian. Instead, orthodoxy won. And history remembers the winners. Now consider someone erased more subtly. Mozi, an ancient Chinese philosopher. He argued for universal love, merit over birth, opposition to aggressive war. His ideas competed with Confucianism. They lost, not because they were weak, but because they threatened existing power structures. Mozi's school declined. His texts faded. Confucianism became state doctrine. Imagine a civilization built on universal compassion rather than hierarchical harmony. That world almost existed. Now consider a figure surrounded by conspiracy. Imhotep, architect, physician, engineer. He designed Egypt's first pyramid, developed medical practices centuries ahead of their time, later deified. Some believe Imhotep knew far more than recorded, that his knowledge threatened later priesthoods, that records were intentionally limited. There is no proof, but there is pattern. Exceptional figures are often mythologized, which is another form of erasure. Turn a human into a legend, and you remove their methods. Now consider knowledge erased by conquest. The Maya codices. Thousands of books destroyed by Spanish missionaries. burned as heresy. Only 4 survived. 4. Imagine losing nearly all written records of a civilization. Calendar systems, astronomy, medicine, history, gone. The Maya nearly changed humanity's understanding of time. Their mathematics included 0 independently. Their astronomy rivaled any ancient culture. We see only fragments. What remains could be misleading. Now consider women erased systematically. Trotula of Salerno, a medieval physician whose writings shaped gynecology for centuries. Her work was later attributed to men, her existence questioned. History adjusted itself to remain comfortable. Now let us approach the darkest idea, that some figures were not just forgotten, but removed, knowledge centralized, narratives curated, libraries controlled, not always through violence, often through omission. Something is not copied, it dies. If a name is not taught, it vanishes. This is how history is edited, not rewritten, filtered. There are also those who believe certain technological leaps were suppressed. Ancient batteries, optical lenses, precision machining. Mainstream historians are cautious. Evidence is fragmentary, but the pattern remains. Knowledge can exist without spreading. Discovery does not guarantee adoption, and adoption depends on power. Now let us end not with paranoia, but with humility. History is not a perfect record. It is a survival story. What we know survived fires, floods, politics, and chance. What we don't know may have been just as important. The forgotten figures we've explored tonight are not ghosts. They are reminders that progress is fragile, that truth is vulnerable, that humanity walks forward carrying only what it manages to remember. As you rest now, let go of the need to know every name. Let the almost remain almosts. Let the near misses soften into silence. Because even forgotten lives mattered. They shaped the edges of the world you live in. And perhaps that is enough. There is one final truth about forgotten figures that rarely gets spoken aloud. Many of them were not forgotten by history. They were forgotten by people. History is not an entity. It does not choose. It does not judge. It is shaped by repetition. What is told again survives. What is ignored fades. What is uncomfortable disappears quietly. There are countless individuals whose lives sit just beneath the surface of recorded history. Mentioned once, hinted at briefly, then never again. A name in a margin. A citation without explanation. A reference with no follow-up. These are not accidents. They are the natural result of time compressing complexity into simplicity. Now consider the idea of parallel brilliance. At nearly every major breakthrough in history, there were multiple people arriving at the same insight independently. Calculus, evolution, astronomy, flight. We remember one name, sometimes two. The rest dissolve, not because they failed, but because timing chose someone else. One letter arrived late. One manuscript was unpublished. One patron died too early. Humanity moved forward anyway, but along a slightly different path. And those small deviations compound. Imagine if a different mind had become foundational. If a different philosophy had become default. If a different temperament had shaped institutions. The future would not be unrecognizable, but it would feel subtly alien. Now let us consider forgotten figures not as individuals, but as warnings. Because many of them shared something in common. They questioned certainty. They resisted consolidation. They challenged narratives that promised order at the cost of complexity. These people rarely become heroes. They become footnotes. Sometimes they become heretics. Sometimes traitors. Sometimes madmen. Their ideas do not die because they are disproven. They die because they are inconvenient to teach. And so education becomes selective memory. Now there is another category, perhaps the quietest of all. Those who deliberately stepped away. Figures who could have shaped history, and chose not to. Philosophers who refused power. Inventors who declined fame. Leaders who dismantled their own influence. These people rarely appear in textbooks, because history prefers ambition, conflict, conquest. Restraint is difficult to dramatize. Yet restraint may have saved civilizations more often than aggression. We cannot measure disasters that never happened, wars avoided, tyrannies abandoned, technologies not unleashed. Some forgotten figures are invisible because success in their case meant absence. Now let us speak of the future, because one day this moment will be history too. Most people alive now will not be remembered. Most ideas will not survive. Most voices will fade. And yet humanity will continue. The forgotten figures of the past were once present. They breathed. They doubted. They hoped. They did not know they would be forgotten. And neither do we. This is not tragic. It is grounding. It reminds us that meaning does not come from remembrance alone. It comes from impact, even if that impact is unseen. As you rest now, allow these stories to loosen their grip. You do not need to remember every name. You do not need to track every possibility. Let history become what it has always been at night. A quiet companion, a distant echo, a reminder that countless lives led to this moment and passed without applause. Thank you for being here with History for Sleep. Thank you for listening slowly, for caring about what almost was, for honoring the forgotten simply by giving them time. Now let the past fade gently. Let the present soften. And let rest arrive without effort. Good night.